Noting that it's 7:04 on June 19th, 2019, I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. We have one variance hearing scheduled this evening and then a number of other items of business. But before we proceed with the agenda as it is now, I'd like to announce some items to potentially be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. So we have 7 items. Let's see, regarding the soil evaluator issue, septic replacement, additional well, planning board request to be on a future agenda, public records request, an open meeting law seminar, and public water supply at Meadowbrook Commons. Does anyone have anything else you might potentially want to add? Does anyone want to make a motion to add these items to the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Are you here for a particular item?
I am. Silverwood Farm.
Oh, all right.
Okay, that's
So
7:50.
that's,
That's
yeah,
it.
okay. Yeah, that's scheduled. So, okay. All right, then let's see if we can tick off these, do we need Mark for some? I think some we will.
From septic replacement.
Yeah, and the soil event.
I can do,
Public records request.
yeah, I can do in number 3 also, because that isn't in submitted yet.
So-
All right.
I can. You want to do this?
I could do, so I don't know if people saw, we got a public records request from the law firm who.
Yes, I saw.
Working with the retailers who sell tobacco and nicotine delivery products, so they've asked for everything on record. I copied Ellen on everything I get and send, so why don't you take care of that if anyone for some reason has.
In tonight's, behind the actual letter, public records request, town council has drafted the initial response that will go from Carol Marple, who's the town records keeper. I mean, Jean and I will have to pull everything together, get it to Carol, and then she'll send this. Right now, he did, who is it? I forget the person at town council's office who drafted this. But, they had indicated in the initial response can go any minutes. So I've already pulled those out. But other than that, it will just take a while to go through all the documents that were provided, all the different,
Right.
to pull them together, but it's a little, I think it's a little easier actually this way because we just get the documents together, give them to Carol, and then she'll do the response.
What would have happened previously?
I would have had to have,
Oh, so it's easier for you, yeah.
yeah, so, I mean, the bulk of it is still in our office, but
It's still a big time sink, a big time sink.
When she writes the response, do we review it before it gets sent?
no, because this is from town council, the response. So
Will we get a copy, though, of the final?
I expect we will.
I'd be interested in
Well,
what the town council says.
It's
I think it's in
in your
here.
packet tonight.
Okay, so
You
it's
have
nothing,
the
right, no, I
initial-
have I read the whole packet
this
yesterday.
is
it's
new.
new. The new stuff that just got here.
That's
Okay,
because it's
great. I was gonna say, I don't
added.
remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Great,
because it's from the 48 hours in advance.
right.
Public records request
And
response.
It's generally not an analysis of anything, it's just a, here's what you asked for.
Yeah.
And I noticed they said some other things about what they're obliged to provide and not provide, so. Okay. You mentioned 3 was something else? you added?
Yeah, the 172. This is the one, I think I talked to you, Daryl, about it before. We had gotten an application for additional irrigation well back on
Yeah.
June 11th for this property, 172 Forest Street. And I returned it, I first called the person who had sent it in from New England Well and Pump Company and explained the board had just passed a regulation, you know, you can't have more than one well for a property. So he asked me to just return the whole submittal to him and he would talk to the homeowner. Well, now, the homeowner sent an email, or the homeowner's daughter, that I got today, and saying that the property in question has been in the family for nearly a century. It was divided into two properties by the Lewis and Campbell siblings about 25 years ago, and has two residential dwellings total between the two properties. George Lewis owns 170 and 172 Forest Street and is seeking permission to install a second well on the property to provide the two houses with their own wells.
So then why would it be a second well on that property?
Different.
But they didn't say they're on separate properties, right? They said, we have two properties, we want two
Yeah.
wells. It may be that there are two wells on one
Two.
property.
Well, that's
Serving
what
both
that's
houses.
what that sounds like. So
Yes.
if there's two houses on two now subdivided distinct properties, they can have one well on each of those properties.
But I think their scenario is they want
They want-
one well.
They want two wells on one property.
To
One
serve
for
two
each
residences.
house.
Right.
Right.
Right, so
And so I think you'd then
But
say,
before, it was clearly
an irrigation well?
an irrigation well.
No.
yeah.
And now, when I sent them a copy of the regulation,
But I think we then need to see the well application, right? To kind of say,
We
this is
still-
where it is, this is the property
right,
lines.
would need to see that,
Yeah.
yes.
And are they separate properties, or are they,
We've divided it up, we put a fence right up the middle of it. We put
Yeah.
two street numbers on it.
so we just need to see it, really.
Yeah.
So we need a clear plan showing the property lines, the residences that they're talking about, where the, okay.
Wells.
And then it will be reviewed, okay.
Do we need septic location at this point, or,
So that would be on
Yeah.
the plan where the well is, because
Yeah.
you need the distance.
Right.
Yeah,
They
okay.
can show us existing, proposed, existing septic.
Let's,
Septic. Well, no, they didn't say they needed another septic, so.
okay, I didn't know if they were ready to actually be able to say,
no.
here's where we
No,
want to put the
no.
well.
They-
Oh, okay,
I
they just
just
want
got the- that it-
conceptually, that's,
Yeah, and that it changed to now serve property rather than, it was an irrigation well
right,
before. So,
yes, another puzzle, okay.
yes.
So, all right, so they're going to come to a future meeting then, I guess.
Right.
And looks like the planning board wants to be on our August agenda.
Yes.
Did they say what about in particular, or?
It's in,
Oh.
it's in your,
yeah,
Possible open space subdivision bylaw.
Oh,
I wanted to give this to you so that you'd have it to
think about.
think about in the meantime, but then I'll give you another copy for that meeting in case you lose it.
Okay. All right, anyone have any issues with them coming? I think it'd be good. Find out what's in the works. Okay, all right, you get them? Did everyone get the email about the open meeting law seminar?
Yes.
I don't know if I did. Oh, was that the MHB one?
No,
That
it
was
just
like
came.
Yesterday or today?
Yeah, just
Oh, I didn't see
today.
it. Sorry, I was working.
It's just an
Check it.
invitation the town is having town council come to present a seminar to anyone who wants to attend.
And what time
We're
is it?
considered employees, I don't remember, do you?
It's
Oh, is it on
It's a
here?
Thursday, July 11th at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Here?
Yes.
Is that, who will be included in that meeting?
I think
Like,
it's,
also
select board is
everybody-
hosting
I
it
mean,
for
is
all
it
town boards.
Employees,
Who's running the,
boards.
is that as much?
Town
town
council.
Council.
Good. I'm around. I'll go.
Okay. Did anyone make the planning board meeting last night on Meadowbrook Commons? I wasn't able to go. But,
It'd be a hard no.
yeah, they were talking about
The wells?
the potential water supply up there, and also the issue of possibly being able to discharge to the MWRA sewer system
Native?
through Natick.
Hmm.
So then, my question, and not alone in this, was whether there would be, I mean, since it'd be, sorry, it's like, that sounds just like my phone ring. Let me turn that off. Okay. Because it's a large development, it's going to pump a fair amount of water. Is that going to draw anything from General Chemicals' direction into Sherborn at a faster rate? And then there's also, if you're drawing water from in town but discharging it out to the MWRA system, which is
Yes.
ultimately into Boston
The-
Harbor, you're
the
going to be
recharge.
depleting
Yeah.
the
Recharge.
groundwater, maybe affecting the folks on Meadowbrook. So you'll be potentially drawing in contaminants and depleting the quantity to some
Right,
degree.
I mean,
So,
Have you ever, when you, at the Dover Board of Health, have you ever had a chance to discuss that subject matter with the chair?
what, using,
Meadowbrook Commons or the?
Sherborne's desire,
Into basin.
certain individuals' desire to tap into that.
No.
Correct.
well, no, we wanted them to tap into Natick public water supply,
understand.
which they
But they're,
apparently
right,
can't.
and because that subject has been discussed at the state level, I'm just telling you that.
The water or the sewage?
The MWRA,
But I think it was,
water.
but I think
We're
the water
saying-
supply is not on the table,
Yeah,
but we'd be
it's
more
discharge.
enthusiastic about that. It's a discharge.
Yeah.
They'll pull Sherburne water, send it into Natick sewers.
Right, so is there a recharge issue? Right.
I mean, the
They're not
town
putting it
has
back.
had MWRA come in to talk about what it would take to get MWRA supplied water to the downtown area. So it's just very expensive to run a pipe. Right. Okay, so anyway, that was taking place, but I don't know the outcome. If there was an outcome or just a preliminary discussion, not sure. I think at some point we should at least let someone at DEP know who has to decide on any issues around the public water supply, what specific issues we have in town, just so they're aware, because they're certainly short on staff at DEP, so.
Did you see the
I think technically
the
it could
DEP
help.
letter
No, I did not.
of approval?
What does it look like?
On the front, it's Middlebrook Commons, just the email.
Breakfast
because
email.
On the back, when
It's
he's.
right on top, that's where I
Yeah,
couldn't
oh.
see. Okay. Oh, okay.
Oops, sorry. Sorry.
All right, so in my very quick scan, it looks like they've approved that they can do the test pumping, but nothing more. Is that?
That was my quick read as well.
Okay. All right, so that might be something to look at, and if there are any people out there in town who'd like to volunteer to work on this to help the Board of Health, that would be great. We could give you all sorts of ideas of where to begin. So 1 and 2, we need Mark, correct?
Yes.
So we could do warrants and payroll potentially?
There are none because you just approved
Last
last
week.
week.
All right,
What about, did we do 4, planning board?
Yep,
Yes.
that was the
Okay.
open,
And then 5 we did,
Yeah.
6
We
we
did.
did.
Yep.
All right, and we don't have 6:11 minutes yet,
No.
because that was too recent.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're done with that. Anything that we...
Oh, what about the letter?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Darn, I did not. We had a whole...
So,
I knew
do
I
we have
forgot
another copy
something.
of it? Because I read it and I grabbed the wrong packet and I just flipped
I didn't
through
bring it with
letter
me
from a
either.
Sherborn resident with suggestions for opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I didn't bring it, but.
Well, I accidentally grabbed the wrong packet to bring it, so I had a copy to refer to what we're having our conversation.
I have to go make a copy.
It's in,
Is it
If I
in
just
the,
introduce the
emailed it.
general topics, and then
It
we'll
should
see
be- oh,
if
it's
we
in-
can get by with that. We could always come back to it.
phone doesn't die.
Like if I just...
Well, it's up to Rebecca.
Is that
no, we have it right, we have it in our email, so I'm going to just look at mine.
Yeah, I'll look at,
Oh,
I'll look
okay.
it on the email. I
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
forgot that I had
And I'll-
double.
You need a
double-
copy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the 3rd, right? Correct? Yeah,
Okay, do
Okay.
you have the date?
June 3rd.
So we received, actually, Matt, do you want to introduce it, or?
Sherborn resident kind of reached out and had a list of sort of suggestions for how he thought the board could be potentially more effective with both bullets and sub-bullets on a variety of topics. And so then, at his request, I shared that with the rest of the board and sent it to Alan to include.
Okay, and I just wanted to, I mean, it's nice that somebody takes the time to share their
I don't have a connection.
opinions, and then you never know, we might get some new ideas on things. I did want to mention a few items. And if anybody else has something that they want to bring up in particular.
June 3rd, I have it here, June 3rd.
All right, I'll just start actually at
Board
the
of Health.
beginning. So he talks about having more information on the town website, and we do have various pieces of information, but it's helpful to hear from folks what else they need to know. And often we try to also provide links to more detailed information that exists from the state or from other resources, rather than us taking the time to recreate things about how does a septic system work. They want to see clear language about what the Board of Health is charged to oversee. There are regulations that describe that at the state level on what boards of health are to do, and also we have a book of regulations that is what we work on quite frequently. So those are resources and give insight into what we spend time on.
I think like one thing I would almost say is, again, not to kind of delve too much into the rich dialogue that is next door, but I think this idea that there's a unified historical board of health that is one acting body into perpetuity, the decisions of that board extending back.
Yeah.
So some of the feedback was multiple boards ago
Yeah.
where there's very little membership remaining now. And so I think that that's the piece, is this vision that as a group of volunteers, we represent some longstanding collective, is definitely sort of implicit in a lot of it. And so I think that there's a tension where I think the view represented was a fairly narrow regulatory focus, which is narrower than the scope as we understand it. And I think that, the resident has a different point of view than I may have, I certainly appreciate his willingness to reach out and offer suggestions for how to get better. But at the same time, you know, again, it's very glamorous. If anybody wants to run, I'm totally happy to not. And, you know, I think that it's really easy to have really good ideas when you're not there, and to say you should have a really short meeting when you're not the person who says, no, I'm sorry, that's the person who doesn't get a chance to talk. And I think that the minutes is one that, particularly kind of being a few years in now,
Yeah.
the degree to which we have to focus on very granular details from a past discussion, I can't, like, having looked at minutes from other boards in town with a different mission, we have a really different task where you're really talking about when the board made that decision, what were the details of that sewing room, which you can't do with a very superficial set of minutes. And we've had multiple issues in my 2 years on the board that have sort of required that level of scrutiny to understand that really small details.
I agree. We could not live without the kind of minutes that are kept for this board, because we are making decisions on complex things. We just heard about another one this evening that I certainly have not heard of that issue before, so however we have to address it and come to a decision, it is helpful, especially in the future when we're trying to be consistent on how we treat all residents, businesses, property owners, what have you in town on issues, to see what was the thinking that went on and what influenced the decision versus the recommendation was that we just have whether it was a yes or a no vote. And that, right,
Yeah.
that we have to do way too much analysis on things to be able to do that. And we're a regulatory board, so we really need to keep track of exactly what was decided and why. So I'd agree with that, and certainly the length of meetings, I don't think there's any board member who wants the meetings to be long, but we have a lot of business that we have to take care of. And also, as you point out, we're volunteers. So again, anyone who would like to help the Board of Health on any of these things that they'd like to see done, we're just residents exactly like everybody else. So
And you get to be
I'd
on
like
YouTube.
to have superhuman powers, but I'm not sure that
I don't you
sitting
think,
up here brings that.
don't you think it would be helpful, I think this begs to me that to provide some clarity about what is the mission of the Board of Health, not just getting into here's all our regulations that we're charged with, you know, making sure are implemented correctly, but the actual overall mission, because to me, this letter, it's very clear that they don't understand what actually is the intent of a Board of Health, and that it is broader than water or septic. It kind of goes back and forth like, it's more than water and septic. You should just stick to water and septic. So there was a lot of, even within this letter, a lot of kind of back and forth about how big the scope is. But I think that would be good. But the one thing that I took away that I think, you know, was a good piece of constructive criticism is the outreach piece and the information we provide. And so things like, you know, tick awareness and things like just general, you know, health sorts of things about maybe, you know, gardening without fertilizers so that, you know, there's less impact on the environment and the soil and the leaching and just things like that, just helping maybe even with other committees to just have more public outreach on that piece and have good resources on our website, which I agree probably.
So that gets tricky in terms of what you would include, because I'll say from being on the Groundwater Protection Committee, where you can look really at what does it mean not to use pesticides, that gets a lot trickier.
Okay, well,
I think when you're a regulatory board,
Right.
which ones are you going to recommend versus being a more advisory capacity?
Yeah.
So
Maybe not that, but certainly things like
and
tick awareness and
ticks, right, but does anyone in town not know
You
about
know,
ticks? Or
there's
What
no
I would
research
say for
all
every,
the time.
what I would say, having
Every
tried to
single-
navigate the Sherborn website, I would say every single board in town could certainly benefit from working on kind of having clearer things, having more current
Yeah.
topics. I think at the same time, it's which are the competing priorities. So if I'm spending 2 to 3 hours every other week on this, how much time do I have? And then if you say, here's the budget ask, like all of these things have money. So his piece was for every single thing that comes up, you should pay a consultant, which again, if somebody wants to write
Oh,
a
yeah,
blank
no, I
check,
totally-
I'm totally happy to do less and have a consultant do more. But
As soon as people understand, like, oh, so your taxes are going to help us pay for the additional consultants because we don't have that in our budget. So where are we going to make?
Right.
We're pretty judicious about where we
Right.
consult, but I think we do it at the right point. You know,
Right.
where
And
it is.
again, I would
complex.
certainly be happy to use consultants more. If the town wants to say, here's a freer budget, great. That sounds marvelous. Like, I
Yeah.
think that you'd look and there are different sections that each of us have stepped up on to say, we're doing a bunch
Oh,
of,
I will say we have done outreach in the past through other groups and often through school groups, and we used to fund some. Unfortunately, and again, here's another pitch, if there's anyone out there who would like to revive SPAN DS, which is a great
Yeah, what happened?
substance abuse prevention program at the school, but that is not active at the moment. So we used to fund them, and then they would provide information.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a
Yeah.
wonderful vehicle that we, I think, all really enjoyed
But the other thing is that
providing some monies for
it's
that.
also true that, you know, as a primary care physician, a lot of that whole long list included things that we are mandated by the state. It's completely public health. It's what we talk about with our patients every day. It's different with every patient. But these are all topics of public health, and if people don't understand that that's our
but what I would say
charge
is,
from the state, we can't help that. But the other thing is that one of the reasons we have a board is because we have incredible experts here and here, and you know, every single person here has a lot of experience, and when we put our heads together, we can give a lot of different perspectives, and I think that that has a value.
and so I think I want to be cognizant of time. I think I'd just say, like, while much of the email and outreach kind of didn't resonate with me, I still appreciate him taking the time to kind of help us be better, and I think there are pieces that did, and I think there are pieces that, again, I think the tone, while the solutions were different than mine, I think the tone came from a place of constructive intended feedback, and I appreciate that, and would sort of continue to welcome that, even if I may not actually do that. Do we want to, but in
So-
keeping with the goal of being timely, it's 7:30, so do we want to do the,
Yes, so we have a variance hearing and are all of the green cards in.
Yes.
And it's
The engineer's here.
okay, fantastic. All right, so are there any abutters to 42 Everett Street? Oh, yes. Yeah, we
So I looked at it a couple of
Well, abutters or anybody else who would like to, the engineer will present information about why the variances are being requested, and then we will discuss those. So if you'd like to look onto the plan while that's happening, you're welcome.
For the record, I'm Robert
spent a lot of time
So this is a property located at 42 Everett Street. It's an existing dwelling, you can see on the little map here. So we're looking to get some waivers to put in a new system in the front yards. But the existing system is currently like right in this area, with actually this diagram into it actually is a cesspool there. I think it's a leaching field with a tank. So we're looking for some waivers to install this system in back in the front of the area. We're in the front corner of the lot, we're pretty squeezed in. As you can see, this is the property line. It runs down, there's an existing driveway here that goes from the house out to the rear. There's some wetlands over here, on their property off to the other side of the driveway. This really is just, it's not really a stone wall per se, it's just rocks. Like the property line. It's really retaining the thing, it's not a wall, it's sticking stone. But it is the limit of the work, and so there is some silt barriers. So what we're looking for, first of all, is a waiver to install in an area where the maximum groundwater is less than 5 feet below grade. So when we did our soil testing, it was actually this pit here that was, as you can see, the site slope from here down to the bottom. These test pits up here, the water was relatively deep. But the water table was only at 40 inches. You can see it was dropping, actually, I'm sorry, 26 inches was the model. So that's from down the hill. Looking for that waiver. We're looking for a second waiver to use the Elgin drain system and put the system 2 feet above the bottom of the sand for the Elgin system. And we're putting that in the trench configuration, as you can see here. And it shows a cross section with the 2-foot minimum and then 12 inches of sand. And then I would point out that we're doing the 12 inches of sand under the unit. but they're now approved to allow 6 inches of sand under the unit, so you can actually get 2.5 feet to the unit for groundwater. Although we're still using this, I don't see the necessity of going less than that. The other way we're looking for is a setback for the owner's well. We're able to meet the setback to the well across the street, which is required of 125. But our own well, which is right here, which kind of circumvents the lot, we're going to be 101. So we're just meeting the Type 5 requirement of 100 feet. 20 feet from the house, and 13 feet from the street, and 20 feet from the lot line on that side.
Okay.
So we're also looking for a waiver to put the system 13 feet from the street. Our setback is 20 feet from the lot line. And that's from the street. We did maintain the one to the neighbor's lot line. And then the last one is the distance to the wetlands. We have 97 feet, where 125 is required. And you can see we're kind of squeezed right in there.
Right, so this is a pretty classic situation of just all sorts of physical limitations and setback limitations, so.
The good news was it worked.
Yeah.
We can't get in there.
No, because they're really, once you draw the radius over here, you've wiped out
Yeah.
the rest of the property as well. So on the, I'll start with the easy one, on the wetlands, conservation reviews it before it comes to us, so we have requirements in our regulations, but we do rely on their expertise and
So
evaluation
they've
of
already
this.
reviewed it.
Yeah, and approved it, or it wouldn't even make it
Right.
to us for our review. And then on the well setbacks, it's good to, we always prefer to see that if there has to be a compromise on distance to a well, that it be to the owner of that septic system, so that there will be more impetus to consider how the septic system is treated and what effect that might have on the well. Okay, and then, Mark, did you have any particular comments on?
Well, I think, I don't know who said it, but they're squeezed into this area. And Rob, just a quick question, the existing system, is it coming out at the same location as the building pipe for this system here?
Down lower.
It's down lower, so
You're gonna have to replumb inside the house.
they will, okay, that's, I was curious if that was gonna be needed, so.
Yeah, it's down lower, that's why.
Where is it, lower? when you
It
say
comes
lower,
out on
just-
that side.
Oh, okay.
There's a tank.
That's
over
why
there.
you got squeezed into this
Right.
area.
So we have a leaching pit, and here's the one, you saw it, that's good, I think.
I thought we caught the edge of it, and that's why I just didn't see it, and I said
So we caught it,
the
yeah.
existing's right.
But I think in the basement, we talked about, you know, when he's had a plumber look at it, we were able to get it out of iron house, he doesn't need a pump system, so that was fortunate.
Okay.
So he does, I think he has a wash sink down there, he was able to get it in there, so it's gonna work fine. Which was good.
Yeah, you can just have a small pump up in the basement, right?
Yeah,
before that or
he's gonna
something?
be all right, because the wash
Oh.
machines go up.
Okay.
So I believe he had the plumber come and look, and it looked like everything was gonna be okay, so. It was running right on the cellar floor of the house.
Okay, and certainly, this system, if it's replacing a leaching pit, is going to be a big improvement to the treatment, so that's great. There's something else I was going to say.
I think it's
Can't
the-
recall, but yeah.
Well, and it's the best, when you look at the well distances and the wetland distances, I think it's
Right.
it's squeezed in, but it's where
And the property
you're
lines.
protecting the
fence.
homeowner as well at the appropriate distance, so. And it's a better system than what's there, so even the homeowners well will be better protected with
Right.
a
Yeah, it's
100-foot
better than the
distance.
leaching pit, which is probably in the groundwater.
Okay.
That's the other thing, this is gonna be above the groundwater, so, with appropriate treatment through the Elgin drain.
Okay, so I will just go through these one by one and we'll vote on them. So do we have a motion to grant, oh wait, does anyone else, any questions, anybody else? Okay. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.02?
So moved?
Second. Any other comments? All in favor? Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So moved?
Second.
Any other questions? So the Elgin and trenches is, as I recall, Mark, good.
Yeah,
Positive.
they're built to do treatment within the actual unit itself, so it's additional treatment than a traditional stone type
Still
system.
providing the trench walls and that, so, okay. So, all in favor? Aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1A?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So, I will close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
They're ready for approval, conditional to 2 deed recordings, one for the OA technology and the other one for the garbage garage.
Excellent, okay. So, do we have a motion to approve the plan with those two deed recordings received?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Good night now.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see.
Everett Street.
Yes, now that Mark's here. So Mark, do you want to talk about 15 Everett?
Mark.
9 minutes. Yes, I'm sorry.
15 Everett?
15 Everett, yes. I have the plans here. The plans were provided by Dan McIntyre. We've been on Everett Street for quite a few.
I was gonna say,
properties.
is everybody on Everett
We've had
selling?
4 since maybe
Looks that
January, I think.
A lot. Oh, it feels like more than that, actually.
It could be. But this is a plan that's not requesting any waivers. It's a plan designed without waivers. That's a very unusual situation. But fortunately, if you get the well distances, Everett Street, and this, we didn't have any models because we were pretty much what Dan and I believe we were in an ester. It drops down here and it was all beautiful sand. And a lot of Everett Street has that type of soil. But unfortunately, the one we just saw was kind of a mix. So the rates were 9 and 4 on that last plan. Well, this is less than 2 minutes per inch. So
I actually would
distances-
rather be slower, but anyway.
Distances to wells definitely increase on that, so you need 150 for the uphill well, and as Dan noted, there are no other wells within 200 feet as shown. So this is that first lot when you start coming up the street, is where you take the angle coming down and coming onto Everett, it's the first lot.
Okay.
They originally were thinking about subdividing this into 2 lots, and then realized, they checked their own system and realized they needed this area for their own property, so they decided to just save it for their own property. So Dan did because we had no models, he had to do a groundwater adjustment. I have it in my hand here, and because he was on the lower side, he was able to choose the well from Norfolk as the USGS comparison well. And he was conservative, because he could have used a site range of less than 10 feet, which is a multiplying factor to the adjustment, but he did use 10 feet, which is because it's getting closer to the terrace here. So it was a compromise, and we talked about it, and I was okay with that compromise.
It's also good because if I recall, it drops off
It does.
a lot, so cleaner we can get it up here because it'll be moving fast towards the surface water body.
Exactly, so.
And that's kind of behind it, right? Yeah, off of
And-
North Main. Yeah.
And distance to the adjusted groundwater is 7 feet, so it's more than 5 feet. So it'll be extra
That's good.
cleansing going on through the soil.
Unusual, but we'll take it.
Well, the nice thing about the state and local regulations, you can't bury a system more than 3 feet. And we require that it be not more than 2 feet of cover. He's going to be right at the min-max of 2 feet, 1 foot. So that helps the control with the system, so the systems don't get dropped too low. You have to have it up where it can trans-expire, some of the trans-evaporate, some of the effluent during the summer months, in the spring and fall. But all the information's here. I forgot to mention on the other plan, but we'll do it in pre-construction, H20D box, because that plan came in after the change. I'll do that in pre-construction. Most installers don't mind.
Wasn't that
Well,
his?
he certainly won't mind.
No,
Yeah.
no, Dan-
It was his idea, right?
Yes.
Dan has it,
McIntyre
yeah.
amendment.
It's a
Yeah,
great
exactly.
idea, right? Someone just installed the distribution box yesterday, and they put the H20 in with no complaints. They say we always use H20, so it's kind of a standard right there. But I recommend approval based on the plan as provided by Dan McIntyre.
That's refreshing to not have any waiver requests.
It was almost shocking.
Any other questions from anybody?
So does it, in this case, need the deed restrictions?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to plan around, maybe I'll mix this up with the last one.
Folder too.
The folders in the other, I wanted to get here.
That's what I-
As quick
Or it
as
could be the one
possible.
right next.
So it is designed for not having a garbage grinder, no, so deed recording is required.
Okay.
Usually
This isn't, is this the yellow house on the right?
it is yellow, I think it is yellow.
It's really nice, like
Yeah, it's
antique.
subdivided, like I said, we found it out.
Yeah. Well, it's good that they checked that.
It's a big house with a garage.
Yeah,
behind
it's
it.
really pretty.
Yeah, very nice, and it's
So
So
do we have a
additional to
motion
the-
to approve the plan, subject to receipt of a deed recording for garbage
which
grinder?
is on the plan.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, Old Orchard, 18 Old Orchard discussion.
Engineer.
And that's,
The engineer's
In our
not here, but I
paper.
can speak to what I think he'll do, and I'll find out so they can, I think he said,
But the engineer's not
I
here.
Yeah,
told him he-
he's en route. He-
Oh, that's.
Yeah.
Tom, we'll just do it, we'll just do it at 8:10.
They can
It's fine.
Well, can we, if everyone for the farm is here, can we
It's not
do
a
it?
hearing.
Yeah, yeah, so let's get started.
So we can take you guys 5 minutes early, right? Okay.
Madam Chairman, I have to recuse myself for this one because I'm on a.
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Well, is this, it's a discussion. Do you still have to recuse?
Yeah, I would suggest it.
Okay.
Just
We're not
supposing
voting.
the parents.
Mark, do you have what I left in the office?
I didn't go in the office yet, I didn't know if.
I have, yeah, there's stuff,
Let me go in the office, I'll be right back to board.
Is that related to this?
there is a couple, one,
Yeah, that's fine, I'll be 1
yeah,
minute.
even the plans.
Still corresponding to 195 West.
I don't, so, I didn't get a packet in the mail.
It was
I got it
mailed.
last week, but I got it last week. Got it really early.
It was mailed Wednesday. We should have got it early.
Yeah, unless someone in my family like brought it in and put it someplace.
Delegated.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's weird.
Because usually I get it on Monday, the
Yeah.
Monday before the meetings is,
They tell me that
Or
it
Saturday.
should be delivered. Normally, I mail them on Thursdays,
Yeah.
and they say
Yeah.
that you'll have them Friday.
I usually have them Saturday.
Yeah, I
and
usually
Monday.
get them over the weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But it doesn't matter, it's
Yeah.
when you've done.
Yeah, as long as, but this is.
Yeah, I didn't, I've gotten every other
Paid
packet.
for it?
Yeah. It could be somewhere, maybe someone brought it in and hid it somewhere.
I wanted to read it because I discovered how interesting it is. Read it first.
So can I just
You
take a
can
look at
over
whatever,
mine, yeah, 'cause I already went through it, so go ahead. Thanks. This is the new stuff, I was just gonna go through.
no, where's the, so did,
This is a lot of stuff.
no,
Yeah,
not,
there's nothing in, there was nothing in the packet
Oh,
for
that's-
this. There might be.
There's a letter,
Something in,
that was in
Public license.
tonight's stuff.
yeah.
Okay.
But that's,
Or an email.
oh, okay, that's it. Okay, got it. Then I guess I do have everything I need.
Okay, we all
All
set?
right, yep.
Okay, this relates to 195 Western Avenue, Silverwood Farm. Proposal is to use the facility for a events. There's all sorts of other approvals, planning board and other things that have to go forward. What I'm placing in front of you tonight is the proposal for addressing the wastewater generated by an event held at the Silverwood Farm. Proposal is to use Clevis Meltrum composting toilets, home flush toilets, and in-wash sinks collected from the composters and then discharged to the existing sanitary sewer system, which takes waste right now from the kitchenette slash restrooms that the employees use. They would not be used by the event, and that's what the composting toilets are proposed to be placed actually in this end on an addition, and that's on page 2 if you want to get into the details. But the calculations for the wastewater flow were made by Clevis based on their experience and the regulations, and they have determined that a day's use with 200 people on an event such as this would generate about 28 gallons a day of wastewater. So that wastewater exceeds the capacity of the existing septic system, which is located about a quarter of a mile away across Pleasant Street. And that system was built, I think, 12 or 18 years ago. At any rate, at the time, there were several test pits. And there were 2 test pits that we proposed to use for this addition. And let me explain. I'm sure you guys know, you've got enough experience to know that when you design a leaching field, every line has to be the same length. Each of these lines were designed obviously for more than 75 gallons a day, but because you have to continue with the standard size, or to match the existing size, we're proposing to put a long leach line of 58 feet, which would actually carry considerably more wastewater. And what I'm suggesting here is, while we're at it, why not add a second line at the opposite end, where there is also a test pit that shows that the soil at this area at both ends meets the Sherborn rules and regulations for 5 feet of groundwater and percolate, etc. That has the net effect of taking the wastewater, which was now on 6 lines, dividing it into 8 lines. It reduces the flow that the 6 lines are currently experiencing, which I think will help it because it is older. So that's the proposal that requires replacing the distribution box with a new one and raising it slightly in order to accommodate this leach line here at the top end, and then a new line and an additional line to the so the soils, as I say, were I got those out of the records. That's test pit 17 and 19. Each test pit associated with it has a perk test. So we've got 2 test pits, 2 perks. So the proposal is to just match what these existing 6 lines are with 2 additional lines to accommodate that 78 gallons a day. We reflag the wetlands, which are located on both sides. We are in compliance with your regulations for 125 feet.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? So I think that last time we'd seen the Clevis was back in the fall, and it looks like there's a letter from Clevis of October 20th, 2018, where they describe in the profile, new restroom facility is designed for private functions, event facility with a maximum attendance of 200 people 2 times per week, 104 days annually. So
Yeah, but it's not going to be that.
It's 30 to 40.
And we have a new letter for you as well.
Okay.
It's a maximum of 59 events.
But the only, I mean, like what I struggle with is just like, no, there's 59, but the letter you sent when you first talked about this was 104.
Well,
And at that time, you also described it as no more than 60, because at that time you were also saying it wasn't a public water supply.
Right.
So that just makes it harder to be credible when you say, no, it's 60, when they're saying we're asked to design a system for 104.
I guess I'm not following you.
So it
I
says,
know that October letter said, but the current package.
but even then,
implies
but
that-
in October when you told us it's going to be 60 days, and you
Well,
said in your
59,
letter.
it can't be
it's
60, it has to be less than
Right.
60.
When you said it was 59 days in October, their letter at the same time, in the same set of correspondence, you said that it would be less than 60 and their design was 104. So at one point, the Clive sending us a letter saying what's the planned pattern of use was 104 days in the same packet that you said will be 59 days.
You
And
do
so-
understand that the number of days has no effect on the daily flow.
But so
Right, it's still 78
totally
gallons.
get that. What I'm saying is a credibility question of, in the same packet, you say it will be 59 days, and the letter sent by your retailer for this Clivis
Right.
says 104
Right.
days.
Well, he was mistaken, unfortunately, and I didn't catch it at the time, sorry to say. But we do have a letter as of today that clearly states it's 59 events. And the reason for that is because DEP is saying if it's less than 60 events, it's not a public water supply, so we don't want to violate that criteria.
So it's two things, though. So it's one is the water supply, and two is the additional flow for the septic.
Okay.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's, I think what gets confusing is like when we're trying to lump them together, but, so what you're committing to is that, or what I guess DP's
I think we have two pieces. So-
articulating is
yeah.
that they don't need a public water, they don't need,
A public water supply,
Public
so
water,
long
if
as
it's
it's
gonna be less
59 or
than
fewer.
60.
If I could
Sure.
Yeah.
see something.
yeah, because I don't think we have anything current.
And so this says the same thing, 104 days annually.
Thanks.
So Mark?
Yep.
Regarding the 78 gallons a day, does DEP review that to confirm whatever the vendor is claiming?
Yeah, that would have to be something that would, it's not specified anywhere in Title V that I know of, so we would have to look at that and determine what, it would probably be going through the DEP, Claire Golden, most likely is who I'll deal with to ask her those questions.
Okay. And, right, and if they have information from other systems or something, just as a check on it.
Yeah, and that's the other similar facility.
And does this, because it's a composting toilet system, does it get the reduced, the 50% gray water volume for calculating additional
It actually
SAS
has
area?
nothing to do with
Oh, it doesn't
that.
affect
Right,
it?
yeah, it's-
Oh, okay.
Right. Those are like, if they wanted to install this composting system in a home, which we did on Maple Street some time ago, the flow generated can actually be placed in a cesspool, and the flow calculated from the home, if all you're doing is composting toilets, regular sinks, and we have showers and all those other things, then you can take a 50% reduction. But this has nothing to do with that.
Okay. I didn't know if it would apply here or not.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So, and the other thing will be that, that'll be reviewed, and the other question will be, can you add a Caltech to a leaching trench system? The existing
Oh,
system of
so
leaching
it's a
trench.
different-
Existing system is Caltex, that's why I'm using it.
Oh, they're showing leaching, is that why? Because it shows leaching trenches on the original plan.
Well, the information I had from the file said they were Caltex.
Okay, I'll double check that, because I got one showing leaching
Yeah,
trenches.
What's the date
Be
on?
glad to
And
make
this is
some
back-
information out of it, but-
You know, that's why I'm saying one or the other, because it has to be equivalent.
The same.
Right, absolutely.
And this was dated 1997. So we can double check that.
Okay.
And that might have, if it's one or the other, as you know.
Yeah.
So if it's Caltex, then Caltex. If it's not, we'll go that route.
I'd rather do trenches, but
Sure.
my understanding is Caltex.
I was wondering why you, again, we can check that out. We might have just a set of plans that are conflicting. This one shows trenches, so we'll look.
Okay.
So,
And I had a technical question. I'm obviously not an engineer and clearly don't know. Is it common for people to just sort of design their own septic like this? Like, how do you evaluate the efficacy by changing the lengths if they're usually done to a standard,
Well, that-
similar length at each section? Does it, although it, obviously I understand that it increases the, the distribution
Yeah.
and therefore minimizes toxins, et
Right.
cetera, is that type of flexibility common? And what is that
Even
something that has
distribution,
been studied?
It's a good question, because back in 1995, the state said if you have a system built from 1995 as of March 31st onward, you can add on to it. But we're now 25 years away almost, and now the question would be, would you still get equal distribution on, for this system, probably 98, so it's probably close to 21 years. So to answer your question, I think we would have to see that this septic system, if all of the other parts are appropriate, is it receiving flow and going right in? Or are you seeing any shading in that D box to show any effluent above the exiting pipes, the outlet pipes?
I think Mark is the answer to that. Before we started this process in October, we said, got septic out to do a Title 5. So
Was
there
there
was
any
no
scoping done?
Pardon?
Was there scoping done at that time of the
Scoping.
lines?
No, they found the
Camera?
liquid level in the D box to be at the inverts and not above, so it passes.
Okay, would scoping be a good idea to see what
It
what's
wouldn't
going on
hurt
out
to
there?
just throw a scope down to make sure they're not failing in any way, but obviously if the effluent was below the base of the outlet, that's a good sign.
Right. I mean, that's the criteria for passing Title 5.
Mhm.
I don't know that you've required anybody else submits a
But
passing Title 5 to go back and scope it to
But-
see if it really passed.
yeah, with trenches,
I mean, we are talking.
Caltex are easier to scope if they are Caltex. The reason they're easier is you can look inside them to see if it's Caltex shaped like this. If the effluent's up almost to the base of where the outlet goes, then you know they're pretty much completely and all close to failure. So that's why scoping is not a bad idea.
I guess my piece
So-
would be, like, I may want it, or I may like it, but it sort of feels like if we did it and it looked fine, it doesn't mean the system couldn't fail 2 years from now. If it looks marginal, it doesn't mean that this won't be a benefit, or that the delta in effluent proposed would not be well served by the additional capacity. Like, it feels a little tricky to figure out what it's telling us definitively in terms of what we decide with or without scoping.
Well, here's what I was thinking about. So it's more of an exploratory question because, as Mark pointed out, when they wrote the regulation, you could add on for systems that were built when Title V came into existence, but that was a very long time ago. So part of the question of scoping would be to see if it would affect how you would place those additional trenches to ensure that flow could be even to them. That's just what I was thinking.
Okay.
And I wasn't saying it's a requirement. I understand we haven't done it, but we are starting to get into new territory in terms of pushing kind of the limits of certain things. And if it's, but right, things could change be fine today and different tomorrow.
Again, if I
I
could
was just
repeat myself.
asking whether it was a benefit
Yeah.
also to them,
I-
to even know that, so you
Okay.
could be designing it differently or properly up front to match
Again,
what's
let me
going
point
on.
out that by adding 2 lines, we're effectively reducing the flow to those existing by about 15%. So that helps it.
Mhm.
Now we're going to be distributing all that wastewater to 8 lines instead of 6.
But you
Well,
have an
you're adding more
increase of
wastewater,
the
so-
78 gallons.
78 gallons, you have currently 1,200 or something.
So,
So the current capacity is what?
I forget, it's on that, I don't have that, oh, maybe I do have it.
yeah, that's what I was looking for.
It's up
I
around
wasn't seeing.
1,200 gallons a day. Do you remember, Jonathan?
So it's 1,200 gallons per day.
It's not on here.
Yeah, we're adding 78.
Right, so it's about
I
12.
don't have the original design, all I have is the as-bills.
And there were 6 trenches going to 8?
Yes. We're adding maybe less than 1%. But now dividing the flow over 8 versus 6.
So we
It was
have had
originally
other,
designed for 9 bedrooms, so I'd have to check back in the plan to see exactly what the flow was, 990 or more. It could be more than 990 based on if it was designed for a garbage grinder.
so,
Increasing the flow by 6%. If you're going from 1,200 to 1,280, but you're adding 2 lines. So instead of 200 a line, 1,280 divided by 8. it's 160.
In any case, I like the idea of the composting
Yeah.
toilets. That's certainly a reduction on some sort of loading out there.
Takes the garbage waste out of the waste.
Right.
It's all over the compost.
So, strongest biological, at least.
So I know this
So,
is. Can I ask
I think it's, some of the confirming on just the flow volumes, but that's going to be a DEP call
Okay.
to some degree on whether they're the ones who set most of those guidelines about.
Yes, they do. Yeah, you gotta go to, basically in 15262 for gray water, you would define what
This is Joe
what the.
Shannon from Columbus.
Hi.
Yes, I'm Joe DeShop from Clevis.
I was wondering who you were.
Sorry. So 15262 is gonna define what gray water can be. DEP will look at that for public and commercial applications. You can do a site-specific design for it. And in this particular case, all they're doing is, it's hand washing water, is what the gray water would consist of. The effluent that's being discharged would be a much higher quality than what would come out of traditional flushing toilets, or traditional wastewater from a commercial application. So what we would do is submit that letter to Claire Golden. She would sit there, put it in front of a review board, come back and either yea or nay the design flow. It's similar to what we've done at Cranes Beach, Mass Highway, I mean, much, much larger facilities where we've got 98% reduction in design flow. We're not putting any of the toilet waste out there, so TSS are drastically reduced. The quality of effluent, it's much weaker strength than you would get out of a septic tank. That's why this technology is allowed for, like residential, 50% reduction, advanced loading in nitrogen-sensitive areas, which this is not. Particularly just looking for a reduction in flows.
And are all the stats about, how many times people use the bathroom and hand wash, is that just a basic formula?
Yeah, so basically I've been doing this for 30 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, it seems reasonable.
And what we do is we try to account for everybody. We're saying there's 200 people here, we're gonna say everybody's gonna go to the
Bathroom twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
Not only are they gonna go twice, they're gonna wash their hands.
Well,
You guys
I
are
hope
from the
so.
Board of Health. I'll tell you now, the record keeping that we have, it's a shame to say that not everybody washes their hands. But I have to deal with absolutes when
Oh,
we
yeah.
present it. So we're gonna say everybody's gonna wash their hands and they go to the bathroom twice. And I believe there's a 25% margin of error in the
Yeah,
bottom there, so
peak.
it also increases.
Yeah.
The other thing that's nice about this facility is, it's not every day. So you're gonna see peaks and valleys. You're gonna have the event, and then it's gonna have a day of rest period. Because these events are not,
Typically weekend events.
right, they're not 60 events continuous, I'm sorry, 59 events continuously. It's, weekend event, 2 or 3 day event, and that's it, takes a break, the system gets let's say a rest period, then the next week comes and it gets an event.
Question, and
No, no.
maybe,
Go ahead.
just a question, and it's related to the plumbing, and I didn't know if there was gonna be a proposed low-flow type plumbing where you press down, you get water for 30 seconds. or
Yep, there is, and so in the
10
design
seconds.
flow, they are required to use low flow aerators, so I believe it's a 0.5 gallons
Says
per
that,
minute.
yeah.
And it has to be
I
set
haven't-
for a particular period of time. So,
10 seconds.
We're trying to account for absolutes, that everybody's gonna
Okay.
wash their hands,
I press it twice.
so then you make up for
There we
the
go.
5
Thank you.
gallons.
I didn't see that.
That's it twice, it's a long way to Washington.
Right, and all that's reasonable, it's just that DEP is going to be the one to weigh in on
Correct.
whether
They're
the
gonna-
numbers are
That's right,
are
'cause they do the
suitable,
design
so.
flows with the tables that
Right.
dictate what the flows are.
Right.
So they have track records, and we can provide additional information to them. Like I said, it's similar to roadside rest areas, where it's a hand washing application.
So, Paul, if you, let's say, had to have another trench, do you feel that's possible here?
Well,
If they come back with something different?
yeah,
on
we're
gallonage?
proposing 2 trenches, where only one is required now to cover the 75 gallons a day.
Okay.
78 gallons a day. So I'm suggesting while we're here, why not do the second trench and divide the waste further?
Okay.
And I think we discussed before, like the food prep, it'll be all self-contained, they're not gonna be needing to use any of the
Right, there'd be no
sinks or
facilities
things like
provided.
that, yeah. That's what I remember, but it's been a while.
And the plans came in Monday, so obviously I'll have to get them reviewed and send all this information off to the state.
Okay.
So do you send it to the state?
Well, Paul can
Do they
send
send
it,
it?
Clives can send it, I mean,
Usually it comes from the engineer. Submitted, you talk to, in this case, it's Nero, which cleared Golden.
Right.
And explain what we're trying to do. This is the property of Board of Health, whether they endorse it or not, but they're looking for guidance to accept the modified GPD. And then from there, you guys could make a decision from based upon what DEP says.
Math looked maybe logical.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I don't really see anything necessarily standing in our way if the soils are appropriate and the design is appropriate. And
do we have the
What have
Title
you?
V report? on
Yeah,
file?
that was done in October,
We'll look for it.
Scott Septic did it.
We can look for it.
I'll check with Scott Septic if you don't.
No, I just don't have it here, but it may be in a
Okay.
different file.
Could be in the file.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I know that we periodically ask Mass DEP how long we can keep adding on to these systems. That's why I ask about the scoping, is not to be punitive, but it could be informative for what you're doing and while you're out there and all the rest. So it's in the absence of anything, any new guidance
Okay, and also,
from
you
the
know,
state on
we
that.
haven't
So,
presented this to conservation, we've had the ones with new flags, and they're virtually the same as they were when the original plan was done. It's
Well,
very-
refresh my memory, I think this is why I've forgotten, is I have old plans and new plans. Were you the as-built, it appears that you were the as-built engineer for the
Right.
installation.
Right,
You didn't design it originally.
Right.
And on your as-built, you do indicate 6 rows of Caltech 180s, so
Yeah.
it is on your as-built plan.
I don't know how that
Originally,
changed,
the
but-
engine, well, we'll have to go back in history. Originally, it was trenches, and now it is Caltex to clarify the minutes.
I just want to be cognizant that time is about 8:10, but it sounds like, kind of broadly speaking, assuming the state's comfortable and there are no surprises in testing, it sounds like we would expect to be comfortable.
Would you be in a position to approve it subject to that tonight?
We should go through the
much.
process.
I think I want to know, just because I don't know what the state will
Yeah.
say, and there may be more subtlety to that.
and also Mark hasn't
I
had a
haven't-
chance
This
to
isn't a
do
hearing.
that.
It just came in Monday, so.
This is a
I haven't
hearing.
had a chance.
This isn't a hearing.
Pardon?
This isn't a hearing.
It's a discussion.
Discussion.
It's just a meeting.
Just people.
Just discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, but you
people.
can submit the application fee,
Well, that's the submittal for the plans, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make it a hearing.
Yeah.
okay? So there's nothing
It
over.
was good discussion.
Okay.
It's worth the time.
Unless you're asking for variances, but then there's,
Which we aren't.
yeah.
So Mark, I know, is it Coltech that's having some, historically, it's
There
turned out
was
to have some problems? And
depending
is there,
on what the use was, there was a time, I hope it's been corrected, they designed them differently, but there was a time where they were being, I guess, at one point crushed from weight. So there was weight for drainage.
Things on top of it?
Yeah, they were using them in actually parking lots for drainage, and
Okay.
there was some issues there, and then there were a few issues on some of them filling up. That's why the scoping I thought was a good idea. But then tends to be, they get aerated, and it's just, we'll see what the Title V
okay,
shows, but there
so
were
there may not be
concerns.
an exact match, is what I'm thinking, because
Well, the
they may have
context
had
that-
to change the design
Yeah,
since
they'll be
these
structurally
went in.
sound. They should be a structurally more sound system.
Yeah, I
They
don't know,
added
they
more
use them.
ridges to them and so
They
forth.
make one called heavy duty, and in reality, the only difference is the non-heavy duty, the regular ones are made from recycled plastic. You can't tell the difference to look at them. The heavy duty ones with the blue stripe on them and they're virgin plastic. So this, the recycled ones apparently, there's the opportunity for weak sections because they're using all kinds of junk to make them. So with good virgin plastic, they're much better.
I think they're also point to point, like in each break, there's a stronger connection. It's shown that by
Yeah.
an installer, how they're a little
And
different.
these are in the middle of a hayfield, and that field's been hay for the last 20-something years with farm equipment, and they haven't collapsed. Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so we have 18 Old Orchard.
The person that presenting is Tom Rood, the soil evaluator for the septic system, and he works with the engineer who wrote the letter that the board members have from John C. Spink. And this is related to 18 Old Orchard.
I am a little confused by the letter, so
Okay.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to getting some clarification as to what he's really asking.
Sure. Well, that Tom's here.
Well,
and-
apparently the sand that was brought to the site is supposed to have like 5% silt or less. Apparently, he's had like 3 silt analyses done, and it's come back at 6%. I've been a soil evaluator for almost 20 years, and I've seen pretty much every kind of sand soil you can think of out there. And 1% of silt, one way or the other, when you do a perk test, it's going to be an immeasurable difference. In other words, you do a
Negligible,
perk
yeah.
test, you conduct the test supposed to be a foot in diameter, 18 inches deep, which is the size of a 5-gallon bucket. So I drilled holes in the bucket, told soil to hold the soil open. And to do the perk test, what you do is you put a ruler in there, you pour the water in there, you bring it up to the 12-inch mark on the ruler, and you look at your watch, say it's 9 a.m. You continue to, because the water's going to start dropping right away, especially in sand. So you just continue to pour water in there for 15 minutes. If you use all your water in less than 15 minutes, which in sand, you're most likely going to do it all the time down in the Cape, a lot of times you're like 5-6 minutes, all the water's gone. So you just say, assume a perk rate less than 2 minutes an inch. But if the soil is not conducive to good drainage, like sandy loam or something, you put the water in, it may take 45 minutes to drop an inch. So anyway, we were proposing to, where the system is now, it's currently installed, we were gonna propose to do a perk test, say on either end of the system, and if we were to get a perk rate of, say, 2 minutes an inch or less, can we keep the sand and leave the whole system in place? Because like I said, 1% of silt, one way or the other, is, as I said, going to be a negligible difference.
Okay, the way you explained it is much clearer than the way it was written. I literally was like, what was the problem? Like, I couldn't even say. So it's basically 1% over what
Yeah,
the
1%.
requirement is. But you're saying if it functions as the performance standard requires at less than 2 minutes, can we
As I said,
accept it?
That's what we want to see. In other words,
Yeah.
if we do this perk test, in other words, that's going to kind of prove that
Right.
1% is, like I
Right.
said, it's negligible.
Yeah. I mean,
Because the alternative is to
dig it all up.
rip the system out of the ground and get new sand in that satisfies the criteria and essentially start the whole project all over again.
So
Which
make
is-
it performance-based versus,
Well, we will need to see the sim analysis. We haven't seen any of those yet, so they have not
He
been.
should send them to you.
Yeah, he-
Brian has it. He said he's done it 3 times.
yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah, we haven't seen them yet, so that's okay. I think he was
So,
trying to.
He says that each of them has come back at like 6%.
That would be good to have them on record. We need them on
He should
record,
have said that to you.
but
Yeah.
that won't stop the discussion. It's just we need them on record, unless they're different from what's being discussed. 1% of the 5% you're allowed is actually a 20% variable from that 5%. But as Tom said, if you pour water in and you're getting a perk rate of less than 2 or 2 or less, then it should show that the soil's permeable and that 1% is negligible, and we'll find that out if the board so wishes to approve this. It's a waiver to Title V.
Right, I was gonna say, so from a, waiver perspective, it was a waiver because you're not meeting the prescriptive requirements of the sand content
Well,
versus
I
the
can-
silt
As
content.
I said, I can tell you this, in the whole scheme of things, it's going to be, as I said.
Oh, I know, I'm a geologist, I know, I get that part.
The soil under the
Yeah.
system, the natural soil,
Yeah.
we perk that,
Yep,
and we got a perk rate of like 10 minutes an inch.
yeah,
So, in other words, the fact that, our sand at 1% is silt, like I said, as I said, in the whole scheme of things, it's gonna be in other words, what's gonna happen is when the water into the system, it's gonna fly right through that sand, and then when it reaches the natural material, that's where it's gonna take a
slow
long time
down,
to soak in.
yeah. No, I totally get it, so it's just more going to, are we willing to accept a performance-based
Right.
criteria versus the prescriptive Title V requirement? So, that's all. I mean, from a scientific perspective, if it walks
Going
like a
slower
duck.
is always better to me, to
Yeah.
a point, without it being too slow.
Yeah.
Then you get waterlogged conditions, but
Yeah.
we're not close to that, I don't think, for this.
Mm.
There is a question on where this sand has come from? Because apparently the state has seen this problem a number of times recently.
I'm not the installer, I didn't buy
Okay.
this stand, the installer did, he ordered it from some sand block that he uses. Like I said, at this point, I'm the civil engineer, I designed this thing, so at this point right now, I'm kind of out of the loop. So they kind of brought me back in to
Okay,
essentially
so
do these
we might
permits.
just,
I
Find
was
out.
told by the installer the sand came from Kimball. Kimball's Sand and Gravel.
and have others gotten it from
Well,
there?
in
or-
my years of doing this, I've seen about 3 to 5 in years, and I can't say which companies, it wasn't always Kimball, but all the cases, they just removed the sewer gravel and replaced it. And I think, according to Ryan Moorhead, is that how you, Moorshead or Moorhead? He said that they're willing to do that. But at the same time, it will take more time, and the applicant wishes not to spend more time, so that's why they're here.
Yeah.
They're trying to see if they
If
can
you
avoid
did
that.
that, it's gonna make a mess, it just really is. In other words, he's gonna dig it up, remove all the chambers, and all the sand's gonna get all mixed in with the natural soil, and it's gonna be a big mess.
Well, it can be done. You remove the soil, you
Yeah.
scour
But
it.
what I would go is, I think, like, for me, the sort of question is less about this. It's more about, what are the pieces of, you did this for X, now I want to do Y. X and Y are the same.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we're
Yeah.
gonna conduct a perk test, if it doesn't fly, then we'll say that's it, okay, it
But
doesn't
but I
work.
think this goes back, so from my standpoint, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, I'm just trying to think of what are the secondary implications, because it's not this property that I'm worried about in terms of you've now gone to a performance-based standard in this instance. Do we have any concerns about that opening up a larger discussion, or is it scoped narrow enough in this particular scenario where you're not saying we're making a big shift?
So I have a question. So when someone brings in the sand or goes to the lot to order it, there's not sort of a percentage confirmation?
Like I said, I'm not an installer.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Croft. I am the daughter of the owner, and I've gotten involved and have talked to a number of the people involved. First of all, what I was told is that by your bylaws, sand is usually tested and can be by your bylaws upon installation. The state law, I'm talking, when I spoke to Claire Goldman, said that it is your right to test it if the state sets the mandate at 5%. When I spoke to the president of the people in the company, Kimball, they are tested, their sand is tested at various times, and there's large bins of this as they do the silt stuff, that when they test a portion of it, they said there can be parts of it that might be deeper than the other, or a part that it came from, but that they tested and that they have been supplying septic sand. And in this gentleman's estimation, he had replaced the system sand in the 15 years he'd been there. So I'm not really
They
sure.
may not have bought it from the same fella twice.
Pardon?
If I got it and I got 6%, that's not the guy I would call to replace my sand.
No, I understand that, but he has not had.
No, he's
the
saying
issue.
he hasn't
The
had
Kimball
a
Sand Company
situation
has
where
not
they've
had
had
the
to
issue
replace
of
it.
not meeting the state standard
Yeah, that's what
before
you're
and
saying.
having to have it removed, is what
Yeah.
I was told.
Okay.
And
Because you're
that-
taking an aliquot and they're
Right.
doing their confirmation sampling on
On a
random
huge-
composite sort of
Right.
samples, so.
So that's what I was told, because I stepped into this because it's been such a long process getting this approved, to get this property wrapped up and on the market again. So that's what I was told. In talking to Claire Goldman, she told me that this is a local jurisdiction decision with, if they choose to override the Title V.
What it is, it's a state code.
Yeah.
The state
No,
code
right.
requires this percentage. What Claire Golden has said, and that's her last name, Golden, is that she repeated what your conversation was, is that the yard should be testing on a regular basis, like daily, not as whenever they wish to, especially if they're, providing material that has to be tested in place. That's our regulation. Our regulation, which the state allows. The state says right in Title V, each community has the right to require testing in place. It's a quality control situation. As we can see, it has proven that sometimes it's not what it should be. But the Title V requirement says it shall meet that specification for a sieve analysis. So it's not right now, but Title V is, the DEP rather, has changed their procedures for waivers. they're relying more and more on the local entities to grant the waivers from Title V, not the state. So that's the position the board's in right now. You're looking at granting a waiver to the state if so desired, and that's because the state now feels it should be at the local entity because of many issues at the state level. Most of it's time issues.
How was this issue caught? Was it caught with you out there, Mark?
No, the engineer, GLM Engineering, was doing the sieve analysis, and they're the ones that have indicated, the way I heard it was from the installer, Ryan Moore said, that he was trying and he kept getting results that weren't
6%, yeah.
Well, so I guess, in answering the first question, it seems like, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but it doesn't sound like anybody feels like there's a material performance difference in this particular property based on the 6% versus 5% that couldn't be addressed by doing the perk
Well,
test.
I mean, he hasn't done the test yet, so
Yeah.
We're requesting a test.
yeah.
Right, but if you did the perk test and they looked okay, would you feel comfortable with that the system would be performing adequately? I think is one question, because if the answer to that is no, the slippery slope question doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I think it's more the second,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is a
secondary.
slippery slope, and so, Mark, how many perk tests do you think would
Well,
have to
I
be
would say
done?
2 to 3, just to make sure it's consistent. And
What
then
about, he's saying on either end, should we do one from a
Probably we can
central
fit one in
place?
the middle.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking as well, so we know it's consistent.
Yeah, just across.
And the other thing too is in Title V, you're granting a waiver to Title V.
Right.
Which kicks in now our regulations that says before you can grant waivers, you need to have a hearing. So you would have to waive our waiver procedures.
Oh, now that I have to say, Claire Golden and the DEP have been very clear that they do not want us not doing the proper notification for
No, I think we
this
should.
kind of thing, so.
Right.
Can you explain that to a layperson, what you're talking about?
That's where you have to send out the notice to
Oh,
neighbors
to
saying
butters.
that,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Green cards, basically like you did the
Yeah, yeah,
first
what
time
they did.
around.
Understood.
And then we'd have to call it a hearing at the meeting. So
Yeah.
once you get the results, if they come back positive, then we'd have to hold
So
a hearing.
I have a question what
Yeah.
the slippery slope discussion is. What is-
For us, it's if we want to treat folks the same and try and apply the regulations evenly and fairly to everyone, if we make this allowance here, how many more times this is going to come up where then it just starts to be,
And it's not just a sort of silk piece, because again, I
No,
think
no, I
that doesn't come up very often, but it's, well, you have this requirement, but then you said if it works well enough, you can do it. I have an analogous situation that's not 6% versus 5%.
Right.
It's a different
It's a different
regulation
problem.
altogether.
Yeah.
Why can't I?
What we're saying was with 1%.
No, but we
my
understand.
piece-
We
like,
get that,
my
yeah.
personal piece with Orchard Street,
Yeah.
I have, everything you've said resonates with me and seems totally passes my straight face sniff test. The question then is, if I say this is a variance I'm giving to you on the
On
basis
Title
of you
V.
telling me that, or to Title V,
On
Right.
Title V variance.
right?
which then is big.
But then somebody else could say about something totally unrelated to the perk test, you let this guy test and do this. I've got this property where I want to test and do that for a totally different question. That's the piece I'm worried about.
Like like the title, there's lots of times where people, even tonight, like aren't meeting all the well setback distances. So they're meeting the title,
That happens all the time.
right, so but they're meeting the Title V setback, they're just not meeting the Sherborn setback.
Exactly, 'cause
But then,
when I did this job here,
Right.
Title 5 says the soil absorption is supposed to be 100 feet away from the wells.
yeah,
I could just make that, but in this town, they want it 125.
Right,
But,
right.
but
So
we're,
no,
but
all-
we're
so-
saying there's two levels.
Right,
So
so
we're
that's my
saying we
point.
get that we're more restrictive than Title V,
yeah.
but Title
We
V.
have good reasons for that,
Right.
which we could go into at some point.
But so I guess in terms of next steps, so yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
If you, so you're basically having to decide number two question, which is your slippery slope question, because
Yeah.
I'm not going to take Tom's time to do a perk if you're saying it opens up a door for you all that doesn't allow you to do your job when somebody else comes in.
And I wouldn't say
And-
I wouldn't say that's established. I think that's just the other piece we have to mull, because the first layer of your question
Yeah.
kind of feels easier. And so I think we just have to figure out if the answer to both of those is, yep, both sound fine, then it's easy. We can say, yes, you should do a hearing, we expect it.
But I don't think it's a slippery slope, we just asked them to do the perk.
The
test.
people,
No.
the people on that side of the table
Yeah.
never think it's a
Yeah.
slippery slope.
No, I
No, no, no.
If it doesn't work, then we'll say, fine,
No,
It's
it's not a technical, your
It's not-
problem
okay,
question.
Tom,
It's the
not-
next guy that comes in and says, I can't even meet the Title V well setback, but,
It's not our
but you granted a variance to Title V for them, even though it's completely different and fewer implications, and you met the performance standard.
No, I understand that.
Yeah,
I
so
understand.
that's
So
more,
while you discuss that, I need to understand, if we do get past the slippery slope question, do we need someone from, does Mark
Does-
Orm need to be
He
there
needs to-
to witness?
You're gonna need to apply for
They need to
soil
apply
testing. And
pay
then
the fee
I went
and
over
go
this,
through the whole-
sorry.
We-
So I went over it with Tom or Ryan, I don't know which one, but there's an application, a fee, and it's each time I go out, so we'll make it that one day. We'll choose a day, and the application and fee comes in, and I'll choose a day with Tom, and we'll go from there.
Is this a decision you all can make tonight? Because
I think so.
this has been a very long process. and
Yes.
Well, the
I
decision
stepped
for the
in
perk,
because
but
my mother's
No,
is
to
at
approve
the point where we are
that you can
not
s-
discussing.
we gotta
Yeah.
get that
So,
clarified.
so I think answering the question of the slippery slope, I expect us to answer tonight.
Great. Okay, I'll sit down and.
So, you got, go ahead.
no, so what I was gonna say is, the nice thing about this particular variance is that we can do a performance-based test, which for a lot of these other hypothetical slippery slopes, ones that I would be more worried about, frankly, like if you're only 70 feet from a well, how do you prove that you're actually not gonna be impacting it? Well, you can't, because
Unless
you
we
can.
get asked to do more and more complex tests, whether, what kind of tests.
No, but-
Modeling or something.
Right, but
just-
I think that I would feel very comfortable saying, no, we're not willing to do that, because then you're getting into, well, how do I know that your model's good? And you're trying to predict, like, over a 30-year period, what kind of, failure rates and what can go wrong. So yours is much simpler. Yeah, we understand
As far
it.
as
Yeah.
the slippery slope thing with all the requirements, in this town here, at the very beginning, we did the initial soil.
Oh,
testing
yeah.
On the initial soil.
Yeah.
In this town, we're supposed to do 3 perk tests. We could not do 3 perk tests, we only had the room for 2, that's all. In other words, when you dig a hole with a machine, it's got obviously gonna take up a huge area, and you have to have another area to throw the soil. So we only had
I
this one area.
Yeah,
So
We totally hear you.
Tom,
We get it.
This part is totally not specific to this property at
Yeah.
all. So what I would say is, just let us get through this part, and then we'll be done.
Yeah.
But
We can save all the
but
time, so.
this is not any part of not getting this piece. It's just us figuring out.
Yeah. So the nice thing
Right,
about that,
yeah.
this
It's a
particular one
direct
is much
test.
more
So,
straightforward.
and then, Mark, are there downsides, as he was mentioning,
Time.
to trying to pull it, but beyond time, to pull it out? And would there be more damage to the
Not usually, they
existing
just-
location?
It's
or-
been done 3 times in this town that I've seen, and they just pull it out. Sometimes they'll use it for the grading, part of the grading and so
Right.
forth.
this would have to be by hand, we were to be
Yeah.
told.
But I'd also say, like, if we're not confident, like, I don't want to pull it out. If we say we don't, so if we say that there's a slippery slope, great. Then that, for me, is fine, that if we collectively are comfortable with that. I don't think it's how hard or easy it is to pull out, because I think if there's not a slippery slope, even if it's easy as
Oh,
pie
yeah,
to pull
no.
out,
Yeah,
I
no.
think if we feel like,
I didn't mean
Yeah.
easy, I meant if it's going to cause damage.
Right.
then it makes it easier to say, this
Yes,
is the,
then
okay.
it's, that doing the
kind of
remedy
a cost-benefit
has a
analysis.
downside
Right.
to it.
Right.
then-
Like, are we gonna do more damage by taking
Right.
stuff out?
But it sounds like that's a no on that it's doable, has been done.
Yeah.
It's doable, it's time and possible expense.
Right.
If they damage the system that went in, they have to get new material, that's where it's time and cost. But if they do go out and allow to do the perk by the board, there's still the time issue. Because in Title V under 410, there's a process for a standard review of a variance. As you said, notifying abutters, holding a hearing, and then,
Right, so
but
we're
if they can
talking
get,
a
so
good
there's still,
month out
yeah,
from
there's still
now.
time issues
So-
here.
But if, so I
So
guess.
which one saves you more time? I'm not sure.
Well, can I just ask one other question, just in terms of slippery slope? The other one that seems like I'm remembering when I was first came on the board. There's the Abbey Road well test, right?
Chlorination.
Right. So this was the chlorination,
Yeah,
after the-
disinfection,
right?
yeah.
And so that was one where we granted variance because it was a foreseeable consequence of the thing that had been a sort of positive behavior. To me, that general category feels like the slippery slope that would come in of, this test is a little bit off, but is a difference on being the nitrites are here versus there. like, do we have any worry that this opens up any of the water testing stuff about, you now have introduced a new standard in
I don't
looking
think
at
this is
those?
a quality, no.
I think that was my only question
Yeah,
in terms
no,
of
I
other
don't-
things that are measurable, quantifiable, where you could have somebody say, well, like here we're saying 6% and 5% are the same, even though one is over the threshold requiring a variance.
Yeah.
If somebody came in with a well test and they were 20% over the water testing piece, and they said, well, you said my nitrates could be that, or whatever the test
Well, that's
was.
very different because those are health-based standards and that's a quality issue versus, I mean,
So
what
for
we're
me,
saying
that's
is.
my last piece of slippery slope on this for me is that question. So I think if we're at a no for
No,
that,
I don't think
I'm
that's.
less worried.
I mean,
if
if they
the-
meet this, if they meet the performance standard that the 5% was intended to meet in terms of the perk test, in terms of functionality, it
It's
should
doing
be
what it
fine.
Okay.
But,
But it's also, you know, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's the definition of sampling error, right? I mean, we take those risks all the time because it simplifies things. But the reality is, we don't always have the right information. So we're willing to take the risk, but sometimes it's not.
We also probably certainly have
Liable.
aliquots that are
So-
sampled that are 4%, where really, if we could know the true standard, they're at 7% silt. We just happened to get a 4% aliquot in what we tested on site.
Yeah, but I'm sure that DEP had data to
how many
decide
tests
that
did you
number.
do on site?
And, you know, when you
The test on
biopsy.
site was, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, every single time I biopsy a pigmented lesion, if I miss a melanoma, I'm still responsible.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we're contaminating the neighbor's water and it's really sucks and you didn't mean to do it, but it happens, who's responsible?
Right.
I don't know.
But I don't think that,
It's just,
going back
I'm
to this-
throwing it up for
Right.
discussion.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line. It really is, because it's a matter of function here. We're talking about the functioning of the septic system. But you had a
No,
question.
so how many sieve tests were done to even figure this out?
They claimed three, according, I thought it's two, but now I heard three
We
tonight.
did,
So
we were supposed to do 3, but we did 2. We did
No,
2 then.
tested it.
the sieve analysis.
Sieve analysis.
Oh, 3. He said, Ryan said it was
So they, and each one came up the same?
6%.
I mean, because also, wouldn't the place where you got the sand technically
get
be
the sand.
liable for like supplying, I mean, you expect that it contained no more than 5%, fines, and it contains 6%, shouldn't that be on them? Like,
That's why Mark said they're willing to change it, but the way they explained how they tested and the size of their,
Right.
so I can't answer to how
Or
they
it doesn't,
work that, you know what I mean, in terms of
you don't know if
batch
it'll
got.
work out next time.
yeah, right, so
So-
there's no guarantees,
So,
is
Ellen, can you
basically.
describe the
We'll have
timeline?
to test it before they ship it out, so we don't have the problem again, I guess. but-
That's what they're supposed to.
Well, they've
Can we
got to
go back?
submit.
So just for timeline, just to kind of articulate, these are the two pathways. So if you can just describe if we need to go for variance with our summer schedule, what does that look like?
And soil testing first.
It
Yes.
is actually, with the summer schedule,
July
we're looking
17th.
at,
So the summer schedules, we just have one meeting per month instead of two?
because
So the,
So my question
July
is, if
30th.
we send out letters to the butters, and the butters,
But-
no, hear me for one moment. If we send out letters to the butters, and we go to each one and ask them, and get some kind of formal thing that, where
We-
it doesn't
we
have
saw-
to wait for a meeting, you have to do it in a formal meeting,
we have to have a hearing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
Have to.
requirement.
And it's,
and there's no exceptions, you won't do.
No, it's not
Oh,
us, it's
state.
state.
State
It's
really, really
regulation.
does not want
But I
that
mean, your
happening.
once a month thing is yours, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so would you make a
No. I mean, I spend
Yeah.
like 100 plus hours a year doing this volunteer gig. There's only so much I
I
can do
spend
before my wife buries me in the
100
backyard.
And just so we can get to that state part before we go, it's July 17th, our next meeting, I know that.
But
The third is the Wednesday
that
before.
really doesn't give
Yeah, it's not enough
enough,
time.
it would be August 21st.
So to have a hearing, you have to
It
have the
would-
abutters, and the turnaround time for notification is, like,
Well,
what
they have
lead
to
time?
s- I would need to get a letter
Yeah.
from them formally requesting
So
a
let's say they get it-
specific variance.
Let's say
I
they get
get
us
it
a letter tomorrow.
Okay, say I get it tomorrow. In order to be on tomorrow's the 20th, the July 17th meeting, I should have had the request by no
Right.
later than Monday. this past month. So they're taking a chance. They have to have, so that would, they would have to get all the green cards back no later than July 5th for the, July 6th actually, which is a Saturday, so July 5th. For July 17th maybe. It's,
So if we imagine that we put it on the July 17th meeting and say, if you don't get the green cards, we can't have the hearing,
it gets pushed.
you know, so that would be the place
What
where,
happens if the property right next door is changing hands and so, I don't know their close date?
You send it, you have to request an updated, a butter letter from the assessors. And whoever is on that letter, that
As of what
list
date
of
though?
abutters.
They're- they
If
haven't
you're,
closed yet.
tomorrow.
I think it's from,
You send it
it's not from the
because-
time of the hearing, it's sort of you doing your due diligence, sending out the cards,
Right.
reality at that moment.
So it's reality, not the date of the meeting, is what I'm asking, because it might
Yes.
be a new owner. at the
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
But it's
And
not
then-
the typical time.
So if they
It's
don't
putting
get the
a
green
long-
cards back, then they have to do it again because they would have to do it for another date. Do they have to
No,
put the date
you
on
could-
the abutters
You could just
notice?
change, notify.
Open the hearing that day and just
Oh,
say they didn't
okay.
need it, it was, you know.
And
Continue
that,
it.
I mean, that happened,
Yeah,
what, last
it has
month, like,
happened.
I mean,
Okay.
like, last month it happened.
Yeah, yeah, that has happened before when they do it. But that, it's,
So I think in terms of thinking about how do I resolve this the most quickly, I think the piece is, you could do July 17th. What I'm hearing from Ellen, who's done this a long time, is there's a reasonable chance that will be unsuccessful. And we wouldn't want you on July 17th to say, this is taking forever because Board of Health didn't do, like, we're saying that's probably not realistic. I'd be happy to put it on the agenda and say, shoot for it, but then the risk is yours that if the green cards aren't back, there's no hearing and you're to August 21st, and you've lost that month of
Okay, I
getting
have
the
a
work done.
question. How do we go forward then with saying, because if I can't go to another sand company because I'm not paying money, how do I, what is the procedure mark for me to make sure the sand is at 5% and what needs to happen and how quickly can we do it?
Well, the companies are required to test on site, so ask them if they've tested that day, and are they testing the vein of soil they're getting the sand and gravel from, and tell them, you know, that that's necessary for the purchase and for the delivery. It's almost like a chain of custody, and then once it's delivered, make sure everything's appropriate on site. Tom knows what I'm talking about too, that there's never a chance of mixing, that the trucks that back in don't mix any dirt in with any of that sewer gravel, because there's a chance it could happen at the yard, the sewer gravel yard, or even on site. So we
Can I
want to
ask-
make sure everything is
When septic
pristine.
system, when our neighbor's septic system went in, was the sand tested on site?
Yes.
And by this person that did the, I mean, who?
Usually, it has to go to an approved lab to test the material, so it's
And who's
tested at an
responsible
approved
for
lab.
testing that, the town or the
No,
engineer?
it goes to the applicant, the installer, and the engineer. But usually the installer will take the sample to the testing lab. There's only a few of them.
Can they test it before it gets placed?
I always suggest that. Every time I do pre-construction, I say, make sure your sewer gravel is providing the appropriate gravel and they're testing it. So that's so
Before
important.
you install it?
Before it gets brought to the site too. And I know where you're coming from, Darryl. Yes, and I always suggest, I know it might take a day or two, get it tested before you install the septic system.
Well, so I think for your question is really,
But everyone's.
let's say I have to go down that road because I'm
Right.
worried that August would be a real problem.
Right.
Then what do I need to do to make sure I'm not here? Because that might be the end of me.
Well,
Right, 'cause I feel like it's
my mother's
60
one
yeah.
step in the grave right now going through this
I'm
process.
so
To be very
sorry.
candid with
Yeah.
you. And I found it exceedingly frustrating, but I know you all are volunteers and you're only following the letter of the law.
And in this
But
case, the
it's
law,
been- And it's, all I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say is I'm speaking for her.
yeah,
And I know you all are doing a stand-up job supporting the people in the town. I appreciate it. I know that you're under your guidelines with the state. I find this an absolutely horrific situation for people that have lived in the town as long as they have and supported it. And the guidelines that you're expecting them to know, or the people that are coming to help them. And I think
Yeah.
that this gentleman's letter on how to make things a little better, I think you gotta button up your process. For the people that are in this town, have homes that have been here 50 years or longer, they're gonna fail Title V and the requirements today, and you should have a list of authorized people that have put in systems, B, sand companies that you have not had issue with, C, and I think that these are
we have that.
excuse me, and I believe that these should be handed to the applicant when they are doing this and not left to their own devices.
I think, so what I would say, I totally hear
And
that.
that's not transparent on your website, and that's not transparent to the
What I would
people
push
out there.
back is I would say it's totally not my responsibility for you to have a process for how to do this or to do your due diligence, because you could also imagine the person saying, you endorsed this person and then this went bad. So I would say as a board member, I'd be exceptionally cautious about saying if this fella brings your sand, because if Kimball says we brought sand for 50 years, we've never had this before, well, they're not meeting the state requirement right now. And if I told you you should go to Kimball's, they bought your sand, you'd only be.
You have a list and you'd explain what needs to be done. A layperson does not notice, and as much as Tom does,
But that's
and
what
as much
you're-
as the company, I'm just letting you know.
No, but that's what your engineer's for. That's not what our board's for. And
Yeah.
that's not a place like us being able to say, let me produce this for you, to be able to own and be responsible for that. So that if you end up in a
I
30.
didn't ask you to be responsible.
No, no,
Guidelines
but-
are guidelines.
no,
And
but
you
the-
have a state, you have a mission statement that I don't think y'all are keeping in.
Totally hear it. What I would say is I completely hear your frustration. I haven't navigated the road you and your family are on, so I can't say I know what it feels like.
Good luck.
But what I can say is that everything we're doing, like the slippery slope question isn't driving this. This is coming from the state and the requirements we have to have a variance hearing that we can't move. We
I
can't say,
understand that.
like, that's a non-starter. So I
I-
think for this, the question is really, if we go down this road, then what I would say is, if you can't do August, July 17th is on you guys. Again, we can put it on the agenda, but I would say you may well not hit it. My advice would be get the sand replaced if the timing is that sensitive, because then you don't need a variance to deal with it. If it's then, how do we make it right? I think work with Mark to say, I want to do everything humanly possible so that they send me a bum load of sand, we figure it out in the damn truck, and not in the ground where we're doing all this again, so I can turn that fella right around and say, bring a new
So who am
truck.
I
And
dealing
Mark
with? Mark.
provides that kind of
Mark.
guidance, as he mentioned,
So can
pre-construction
you make yourself
conferences,
available
that's where
to
he
me
does.
to get this resolved? It's, Tom and I are gonna go talk and figure out
Yeah.
which way, but I really do need some urgency in terms of timing. I know you are spread very thin, but
Yeah.
I need to get, I'm very concerned about my mother's health. I know that's not your issue, but I am concerned
Yeah.
about what it's doing to her,
So can I just ask a so let's say that again, I'm not trying to put this on you, but just to
I'm here to be put on. Just
But I
give
would
me
say,
on the
like,
month.
let's just, I think one of your goals is to say, I want to have the most information I can, so I have the best I can do to make choices in a tricky situation.
Exactly.
Mark, can you just describe, let's say that they go down we'd rather get the sand out, we called them, they said we can get new sand next week. Are there limitations on your availability, or are there things we can do to expedite or prioritize to say, what do we need to do to get this to a passed system?
Sure. So it's a matter of now getting the installer as well involved. Tom and I talked about that potential option. Tom would have to do a new as-built of the leaching area only. The tanks are already in, they're not changing any. So that would be one step that Tom knows would have to be done. They're more than welcome to use the materials for the leaching field on site if they don't damage them. They have to pull them up carefully, and I'd suggest that highly, and reuse them if they can. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, is this what type of system do we have out there? I don't have the plans right in front of me. Is it an Elgin, is it trenches, what do you have? You
It's
had
all those chambers.
chambers, so chambers are nice to work with.
H20 chambers.
Which ones?
They're H20.
Oh, you use
plastic.
cement, oh, those should stay intact, and integrity should be fine. As
No,
long as they,
H20 plastic chambers.
they're plastic, as long as they pull them up carefully.
Yeah, the
they don't
H20s
damage
are
them.
heavy duty.
Yeah, so that all would be part of, their part to do, and that might take a day or two, I don't know. But then put those aside, pull out the sand, they can have it either exported or use it on site for the final slopes that they're planning.
So like
And
for
then
grading.
Re-scarify, once they re-scarify the base of the system, I have to go back out and look at it. If that's appropriate, and Tom does too, he works for the engineer, then they can start building the system, the leaching field back up, bring in the sewer gravel, and as Darrell said, I suggest highly, they don't install that system again until they test the material in place to make sure it passes.
And when
So
we say in
can they
place, can
test
that
it
be
right
the
in the
back of
truck? Yeah, that's what I'm.
Well, no, it has to be in place. That's the
Underground.
quality control for making sure that on-site things are going properly too. So no, we don't.
So you have to put it on,
put it in
and then you
place,
do your
But they
sieve
can
test,
get
and
it
then,
off the truck and in place within 15 minutes.
yeah.
It dump, spread.
And then how long is the sieve analysis?
Usually 2 days. It depends on if the company's open. Now we're getting near the 4th of July, so you gotta make sure the companies are open. But hopefully if it's all done in the next day or two, you know, you got 2 weeks prior to the, 3 weeks prior to the 4th. So anyways, back to, and then if that sewer gravel suggests highly, you test it before you reinstall. If it passes, you just keep moving on, reinstall the septic leaching field. Tom goes out, does an as-built, gets it certified by the engineer, comes to us, we look at it, we go out, if everything's good, cover. And then it's a final grade as-built.
So that sounds like maybe if things go on a reasonable pace, like a 2-week from beginning to
I
end
think
process?
although again,
You
it
don't
depends
think?
on the
Install.
weather installer, other pieces. I think it's not us.
No, I'm just trying to like
General
figure out.
Is the
sort of- yeah.
installer available? That I don't
That's
know.
right. That's-
Yeah.
yeah.
There's other factors, not
Yeah.
just myself, you know.
And so-
Versus, the
Tom's
best case for a
availability.
hearing would be
One, so
a
I think for
month.
the question for the hearing, I think right now we have all, like, again, the butters could bring a voice that changed it, but I think in terms of, like, for my personal 2 cents, I'm okay with the variance. With the information we have available, I'm okay with the slippery slope. Is that where a preponderance of the board is?
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with, okay. So,
Technically, with the testing, I'm okay, and I actually prefer slower, just my personal
so what I would say is,
interpretation.
if you decide
Two
either,
choices.
well, you have 2 choices, and both are on the table and sort of up to you about how do you balance those 2 things, but what I would expect, barring something unforeseen, is the board would be comfortable granting the variances unless new information came forward, or there's things with the abutters or in the hearing process, but broadly speaking, there's nothing that doesn't pass a sniff test today, and usually that's a good predictor for where we'd be a month or 2 from now.
And Ellen, are you available tomorrow, just so I understand the abutters letter, or just?
Well, the engineer needs to give me a variance request letter.
Okay.
So I can't schedule the hearing until I get that. Once I get that, I would schedule it, and then it's,
Well, I think we're on for the 17th. If I choose to go this route, how do I get the abutters letter to the?
no, you're not on
Maybe-
for the
yeah,
17th
maybe-
until I get the variance request letter from the engineer.
So he needs to take this and
So-
turn it into an official variance request and
From
be
which
specific.
section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Detailing which
Yeah.
section
Which is-
of the regulations you're requesting, which
That's
section of
And
Title
you had
V.
those for the initial application, right?
But those were in Title V variances.
But again, I think just
Yeah,
that
that
letter
kind
that
of
came
format.
before is this sort of format. This is the regulation, this is the rationale.
Yeah.
And
And
then
you're
We'll
looking at,
talk.
I mean, very short letter.
if it comes in tomorrow, excuse me, I can schedule it for July 17th, but take a chance.
No, I understand that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I think Daryl is
Yeah.
suggesting, that we, you all are. So the slippery slope question is, it doesn't, if we want to go that route, you're willing to try and accommodate, however, Mark will make
I
himself
think we just have to
available, which
frame
is-
it very carefully, and that's the part
Yeah.
Right.
we need
So
to think about
so
between
the
now
way-
and the hearing, so that it doesn't.
What I would say is we're not accommodating it, but in
No, no,
looking
no,
at the
you're just
specific,
saying,
but in looking at the specifics of this case, we think
Yeah.
that there's enough that can provide a system that performs equivalent from a safety and performance standpoint,
Yep.
that a variance would be appropriate.
okay.
and if you want,
Technical.
Tom, one, get us the sieve analysis, we obviously need that.
I
Those,
thought he would have already sent it to me.
Yeah, no.
So if you or Ryan can get that too. If you want the numbers, you're looking for a waiver from Title V. The numbers, I'll give it now so Ellen can repeat it, maybe it's 310 CMR 15.255 3 in parentheses. That's the requirements for the sieve analysis and the passing at the 5%. That's in Title V. You'll be following 310 CMR 15.410 and 411 as it relates to requesting a waiver from Title V. So that, I said 410 earlier, it's also 411. All the processes in there, notification to abutters, most of the process is built into 411. So that's the other section that you can follow to help you out right now to get you started.
And so in terms of the process,
There's no local, no local.
They're asking for a waiver from the state. They tested in place, so they met our requirement, but the test didn't meet the
Right.
state requirement.
and so then, in terms of the process, they'll get the
They get a
variance
letter
request
to
to
me.
you.
Then I schedule the hearing. There's already
Then-
3 hearings for
So,
July
right.
17th that were
Right.
scheduled
So-
before,
so
so they'll
be
be
it.
late.
Yeah, late in the day, but on the 17th. Then what happens in terms of the
Well,
assessors?
they have got to, they get the assessors, the certified list of abutters.
Are there things you can,
After I send them a letter scheduling which I can email it to.
That'd be
but I
great.
need your email. That would suggest you immediately send out the abutter.
and is there any things you can do in parallel? So I think part of what you're, well, just hear me out. Just
Perk test.
Well, but I think for the question of, hey, can you keep an eye out, if you guys are going to the vineyard and somebody's checking your mail, can you do X, Y, like, is there anything she can do to reach out to people ahead of time? Okay.
Well,
Parallel, if I may, apply for the perk test, pay for the fee, and we'll get it out there before the waiver hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And get us the 7 minutes, is like the president.
We already have that, so.
And
I'm
if she's
sorry, I
coming
didn't
in
mean to-
tomorrow, or someone's coming in tomorrow for something, they can just get the assessor's
Well, they-
certified list tomorrow,
Yeah.
so that they can,
the assessors are open until noon.
mailing labels or whatever else to prep.
And so going back to her question for if an abutter is changing hands, the fact that the
That it-
assessor,
We go by the assessors.
but if she gets the
So whoever
assessor
owns
list
it
before
now.
you
Yeah.
get the letter, she would still be covered by that, I think was one of the questions she asked.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the last time we dealt with the board, you guys, which I've never had this happen in any other town in the whole state, you guys require that when I send out, say I send out 10 registered letters, you guys want every single one of the green cards back. But in other towns, like say I get 7 of them back, but I've got the 10 slips, which proves that I mailed them, that doesn't fly.
No, you-
Because there was one green card that we just had a real problem with getting it back for whatever reason. The mailman went there X number of times, they were never home, so
Can
we
you
had to
let
wait to
Ellen
get
finish
them
her
back.
answer?
It was
No,
a
if,
nightmare.
if you read my letter, you can provide, you can take your receipts and go online. If you don't get the green cards back and it's like 2 days before the hearing, then you have to have them back to me. Go online to the United States Postal Service website, do your tracking, and they will give you each step. And typically, it's those ones you don't get back, they might be coming back to you. But if you print that out, and that shows all the steps.
Ellen, I'll talk to you to understand so I can explain this. I understand the 2 options, but it's the level of this.
But I think it's like, how do I get, if
Details.
I'm gonna try to get to the 17th, how do I do that, is I think the question.
Yeah,
here.
but I need to talk to Ellen, because I don't
Yeah.
know all the,
Perfect.
you're talking a lot of things I have to do here. On the one with the sand company,
Yeah.
I will work with Tom, find out what we have to do and Ryan's availability, the installer,
Yeah.
and find out from Kimball how we can assure that we are, so if we go to the degree of, I'm not gonna dink around with the 17th, and we're gonna make the sand
Right,
company stand.
then just say like, we wanna be
Yeah.
done now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I understand where we're at.
Okay.
You still might hear from me just because there are a lot of numbers and things flying around that I'm not sure.
And the other thing, I just wanted to make a comment, because I know it's definitely true. There are 354 towns in Massachusetts. There are only 12 that have 100% private wells. So you're right. Our town has different rules, but that's because only 12 towns in the whole state have 100% private wells. We have different rules that we have to follow. And
And-
so
and the rules are
we
the
don't
rules.
even make the rules. Like, it
We make
stinks
some
for
of the
us
rules.
too. But yeah, we make some of them. But anyway, so I feel bad, but
Have a good
our
night.
hands are tied a little
Actually,
bit.
this house here, oddly enough too, it was literally built in a wetland. In other words, there's a stream right in the front yard, and the wetland wraps around all the way to the backyard. In the house they built it in a wetland.
Oh, we
Yeah,
went to those.
there's nothing like
Yeah.
when was the house built?
56 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for
Before
your
the-
time.
right,
All right,
before Title
Ellen,
V.
Ellen, you're in tomorrow if I were to call you?
Yeah,
are the
in the
hours tomorrow?
afternoon.
Afternoon, Mark, actually, can I get, well, do you have any, if I talk to Jeannie Guthrie, does she have your email or?
They're on the website too.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on the
All
board.
right.
Be in
Thank you very
tomorrow-
much.
be in Tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
But hold on, just on scheduling, if she wants to get an assessor's list before next Monday, you'd have to do that tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Because the assessor's office will be closed.
We'll be closed on Friday, I think.
Okay.
And there's the weekend, so just in case that
Yeah, I'm gonna
plays
discuss
into your
this
schedule.
with Tom and
Perfect.
trying, and we're gonna
Good luck
try.
with everything.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we're done for the night, right?
Okay. So now thankfully, I know it's been torturous for them, but have we had this, we've only had it a few times in the
About
past?
3
that this
times
has
in the
ever-
past. One time we installed it in town, we just removed it and replaced the system, I found out afterwards.
Okay.
The other time was, it didn't pass a perk, it was up 5 to 10 minutes per inch. We're going 20, 30 years of history, I don't
Yeah.
wanna say it happened in the last 5 years.
Right.
And the other time was, they just decided to take it out and put it back in, so.
Okay.
This will be the first time we've ever, it's new to us too, that we've had, that's why I had to call the state, what do we do? You know, so it's the first time ever we would, that I know of in my career.
Right,
that
so it
this would
sounds
be
like a
requested.
series of unfortunate events
Yeah, it
perhaps
really is.
Yeah.
on this
Unfortunately.
one property.
Perfect. So we're gonna set for the
Okay.
night?
I think so, that's my list.
I think I checked
I think
all
we
my
did,
boxes.
yeah, I think we did.
8:58, I'm just saying.
Yep, okay. We're done.
But plans to stand.
Thank you very much, Rick. So our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.